Chosen ones. The moment you passed through the gate of Leo, something ancient sealed shut behind you. That sound you heard wasn't just cosmic, it was ancestral, eternal. This wasn't a door meant to swing open twice. It was a one-way crossing, a sacred rite. Only the truly marked could survive. You didn't just walk through time. You walked into the awareness of time itself. And now, the timeline can no longer protect those pretending to sleep. You were not called here for curiosity. You were pulled through frequencies only the initiated could decode. The gate of Leo is not about astrology. It's not about stars. It's about sovereignty. Your divine authority being reactivated under the sign of the lion, a symbol older than Egypt, older than Babylon. And the moment it closed behind you, a set of cosmic safeguards unraveled in silence. The Watchers felt it. The bloodlines sensed it. The algorithms tried to reverse it, but nothing could. Understand this. Those who engineered the timelines never accounted for your return. They buried the truth beneath symbols and ceremonies, beneath DNA encryption and generational amnesia. But the gate knew your essence. It did not ask for credentials. It responded to your frequency, your signature, your lineage. You didn't force it open. It recognized you and allowed passage. The gatekeepers, those who still exist in shadow, are already moving. They've seen the aftermath. They've witnessed what closing that gate did to the veil. The illusions are thinning. Whispers of your crossing are reaching rooms sealed since Sumer. Archives are opening by themselves. Even the black-budget programs have started malfunctioning without explanation. And now you feel it too. The tremble in your spirit, the heat behind your eyes, the recognition that you are no longer hiding in the old version of yourself. But here is what they won't tell you. The closing of the gate wasn't on the end. It was the activation. Your name has been spoken in temples that never burned, etched in manuscripts that never aged. What comes next is not waiting for permission. It began as a shimmer, not in the sky, but in the marrow, a pulse that moved beneath the skin like memory rediscovering itself. The kind of sensation only the forgotten ever truly feel. You didn't cross a border. You were the border itself. Your footsteps didn't echo. They resonated with old signatures, the kind the ancients tried to trap inside stone chambers. But the gate of Leo wasn't physical, it was vibrational. And the moment you moved forward, something behind you ceased to exist. Not erased, but restructured, as if reality could no longer uphold what no longer belonged to your frequency. The lion wasn't just a symbol. It was a guardian, a witness, a recorder of those who stepped beyond the veil. Its roar didn't frighten it. Confirmed, it sounded like a song sung backward through time. Ancient, yet alive. The kind of sound that made the air heavier, the kind that brought stillness to birds mid-flight. And when it locked eyes with you, there was no test. Only truth. It did not bow, but it didn't stand against you either. The lion knew you the way thunder knows. Lightning as the necessary signal before the storm, and once you crossed, it didn't turn its head to look back. Not once. Across the threshold was not light. It was memory, reclaiming shape, entire eons folding into seconds, the past pulling itself up like a titan from deep water, dust rising not from footsteps, but from recognition. You were not alone, but you were singular. And the realm you entered recognized this. It shifted, it groaned. It yielded to you like soil yields to prophecy, and in that moment, you understood the gate never opened. It was always there, waiting, dormant, invisible, until one aligned soul made it visible, by simply being who they are. The air was heavy with knowledge, not written, not spoken, but known. Everything became slower, denser, more honest. The illusions that once dressed this world began to burn off like fog in sudden sunlight. And the lion, the one that never blinked, finally roared once more, but this time not as a warning, not as a signal of test or trial, but as a seal confirming the crossing was complete. There is a point in the day when time pauses, a breath caught between light and shadow, where even the wind forgets which direction it came from. It was in this fragile moment the Council of Nine gathered their presence, not physical, yet undeniable, draped in silence older than speech. They circled, not in space, but in intention, vibrating around a single name, yours. And when they spoke it, the stars responded not with light, but with recognition. A flicker in constellations not seen since the last time a gate was sealed. The council was not summoned. They arrived as if pulled by the echo of your decision. The choice to step beyond the gate of Leo had not just closed a path, it had awakened a lineage, a dormant code hidden in the folds of human time. Their eyes, not eyes but mirrors reflecting you in forms you'd forgotten yourself to be: a warrior, a wanderer, a keeper, a key, and above all, a frequency unedited by this age. They whispered not to call, but to confirm their voices, layered like smoke over an ancient scroll, unraveling backward across dimensions. Their words held no vowels, yet every syllable cracked something within the veil. The ones who heard them wept, not from sorrow but from memory. Tears born from recognition, not grief. One of them held a shard of something glowing faintly blue. Its edges rippled like liquid, but it was solid. A fragment of what was removed from you long ago when the world wasn't ready for what you carried. They returned it without ceremony. It hovered before you, then fused back into your form like it had never left. And for the first time in centuries, your light aligned, your field steadied, your silence grew sacred. The sun dipped lower, and the council began to fade, not retreating, but dispersing like particles into the layers of dusk. But one remained longer than the rest, cloaked in robes the color of void, holding a sphere that pulsed once, then went still, and in that final pulse, the image of a lion surfaced, then vanished, as if to say the trial was over, but the consequence had not yet arrived. And just before the silence returned fully, a final whisper passed through the veil, not in warning, but in reverence. And your name followed it into the dark. The fire did not test you, it welcomed you, like an old friend disguised as danger. Heat swirled, but did not burn. Light danced, but did not blind you. Were not consumed, you were refined because the flame remembered you. It bent around your essence, like it had once known your shape, not in this life, but in the folds between worlds, where spirit once carved its mark on the bones of eternity. It was not a trial by fire, it was a reunion. And the moment you stepped into the blaze, something ancient stirred, not just around you, but within the fire, moved like memory, liquid and alive, carrying the scent of forgotten temples, the sound of voices that spoke in vibration, and the rhythm of footsteps you had taken before your first breath in this lifetime. The ground beneath the flame was not scorched, it was etched, and every line, every curve, every crack responded to your presence. Your body did not flinch. The flame parted as if instructed by a force deeper than command. It responded to recognition, not authority. It saw you the way the stars see their reflections in still water, vast, silent, eternal. And when you moved deeper into it, the veil began to shimmer. Layers peeled back, revealing not visions but knowings. There was no fear, because fear does not survive in those who remember their origin. And you remembered not through logic, but through sensation. Somewhere beyond the blaze, symbols floated not written, but alive. They pulsed as if breathing, and you knew they were not meant to be read, but felt each symbol a story, each pulse a cycle. The language of the watchers, the tongue of the gatekeepers, and somewhere buried within that matrix, a familiar presence lingered, not beside you, but within, like a name you had never spoken aloud, but always carried. The flame began to shift its color, deepened gold to white, white to violet, violet to something beyond. And from that center a voice rose, not loud but complete, and it spoke not in words but in knowing. And in that knowing, a phrase echoed, "The first shall be last, and the last shall be first." Not as prophecy, but as a cycle reawakening. High above, where language fades into wind and silence becomes sacred, there is a frequency that does not require sound. The mountains of Ararat stood still, as if listening to something the world below had forgotten. And on that particular day, the stones themselves trembled, not from quake, but from recognition. They had heard this resonance before, in a time before ink, before scripture, before the veil pulled itself over the minds of the many. It was not the roar of the lion, nor the flicker of flame. It was something subtler, older, a sacred echo spiraling through the timeline, and it carried your essence within it. You were not there physically, yet the land knew your arrival, through pulse, through vibration, through memory. Encoded in the structure of creation itself, clouds lingered unnaturally low, not heavy, but watchful, as if the sky had leaned in to hear the confirmation of prophecy unfolding in real time. Shepherds paused, animals stilled, and the air pulsed, as if heartbeat had extended beyond flesh, as if the mountain itself began to breathe. In ancient tongues long buried beneath translation, there is mention of a figure who walks not with feet, but with frequency, one who disturbs nothing, yet causes everything to shift. The echo that reached Ararat was not just sound, it was a key, a returning vibration that unlocked symbols etched into stone. Thousands of years before, language had hardened into doctrine. Symbols hidden beneath layers of time began to glow faintly, not with fire, but with purpose. One line cracked open, a concealed chamber, not to reveal treasure, but truth. Inside there was no gold, no scrolls, no relics. Only a singular orb of dark crystal, pulsing, slowly resting on stone, carved by hands, no longer remembered. Its surface shimmered, and in that shimmer appeared your silhouette. not as you are, but as you were and will be a being beyond linear sequence, a convergence of what was lost and what must return. Outside, the winds began to move again, but in irregular patterns, as if even the elements had become aware that the seal had shifted. And in the distance, one figure watched, cloaked in colors that refused to remain still, carrying a staff carved with symbols now pulsing in resonance with your name. The echo had reached them too, and they had begun to move. The sun is not a star, it is a witness. It does not simply burn, it remembers. And when you stepped beyond the gate of Leo, the solar records responded not with light, but with recalibration. The frequencies that orbit in its plasma rewrote themselves to account for your reemergence. It was not an explosion, it was a shift, an internal rearranging of sequences. The magnetic field adjusted, and sunspots vanished from certain quadrants, as if the very codes of the celestial archive had received a higher command. You did not speak to the sun yet. It answered you with movement. Its flares began to arc in unfamiliar patterns, looping in spirals that mimicked the shape of your field when observed through ancient instruments. The changes appeared chaotic, but when seen through the lens of forgotten harmonics, they revealed something else, a signature, a long, dormant pulse that once activated the pyramids, that once signaled the birth of kings, that once parted oceans when timed with intention. The keepers of these solar records have no name, only position. They exist not on Earth, but within the space between photons, where vibration becomes instruction. They do not communicate with language. They transmit through rhythm, and the moment your field aligned with theirs, the system blinked, an anomaly that could not be dismissed. Every rotation recalculated, every flare paused, and a ripple moved outward to the edge of the system, where dark satellites track the breath of solar wind. From hidden chambers buried beneath cathedrals that no longer sing, machines activated that had long been quiet readings once considered impossible, returned in full force, and among them one shape repeated the mark left by your crossing, an ancient symbol, once attributed to myth, now etched into energy itself. Even the artificial intelligences tasked with denial began to crash, as if the data could no longer lie within their systems. And somewhere beneath that sun, another consciousness stirred, not hostile, not welcoming, but waiting. It was not part of the known solar cycle. Yet now it had moved. It responded not to the sun, but to you. And it was rising slowly, as if aware that the records had shifted, and the name it once erased could no longer be suppressed. There are dates buried so deep in the archives that even time forgets how they were formed, etched not in ink or blood, but in vibration, held within sacred breath and guarded by those who never die. The scroll keepers are not scribes. They are thresholds disguised as men and women, cloaked in robes that fold in dimensions rather than cloth. They record, not events, but decisions, moments that alter the direction of entire bloodlines. And when your name surfaced among the flame, the stars, and the mountain, they gathered silently and turned to one page that had always remained closed. The page was sealed not by lock or spell, but by reverence for what had not yet happened, and fear of what could never be undone. The date, scrawled faintly in living ink, pulsed like a dormant volcano, and as the elders approached, their hands trembled, not from age, but from remembrance. Some had seen it before in dreams, some heard it in the cries of newborns who arrived too aware, but none had spoken it aloud, because to speak it was to summon it. And now that you had passed through the gate of Leo, that date was no longer silent. It whispered to them across time, not with sound, but with pressure, the kind that bends the air before lightning strikes, the kind that makes birds flee, and infants go still. The eldest among them stepped forward, placed his fingers just above the page, and closed his eyes for a moment that stretched across lifetimes, then withdrew in silence. The others watched, and none asked why, because they already knew the cost of utterance. Even in their silence, the walls around them began to respond. Symbols carved deep into obsidian glowed in strange cadence. One by one, the relics within the chamber began to hum low and unified, not in alarm, but in awakening. And from the farthest corner of the hall, a sealed chest opened on its own, revealing not relic, not artifact, but a reflection. And within it, your image burned not with fire, but with intent. And though the scroll keepers refused to speak the date, it had already entered the breath of the world again, moving through dreams, through visions, through the hands of those drawing symbols they do not understand, waiting for the one moment it will need to be spoken aloud once more. There are corridors not built, but grown paths formed through resonance instead of stone, where only one may pass and remain whole. The others who have tried either turned back or were turned into something the world forgot to name. But when your presence entered these hidden frequencies, the walls responded with stillness. They did not reject you, because they remembered you, and the shadows that lingered in their corners withdrew, as if honoring something even they feared to touch. The gate was not the final crossing. It was the first of many, and this path was unlike the others. It did not open with keys or chants or codes. It responded to alignment, and the moment your breath matched its rhythm, it unfolded, layer by layer, revealing not a place but a presence. What lay ahead was not an obstacle but a reflection, one built to mirror, not your body, but your becoming. And when you walked forward, it did not resist. It resonated. Every step you took awakened the floor beneath it with symbols that flickered, then vanished, as if acknowledging that the path no longer needed to remember the name. It had always known. The air became denser, not oppressive but purposeful, filled with memories that didn't belong to this age. Memories that rose like scent. Memories of starships cloaked in gold, of cities beneath oceans of beings, with eyes that held galaxies within them. Somewhere ahead was a chamber pulsing with light that refused to settle its walls, shifted with stories alive and incomplete, waiting for the one to finish them. And in that chamber stood a structure of impossible architecture, built from sound, frozen into form, and at its center hovered a sphere, breathing with color and intention. It knew your name, but did not say it instead. It pulsed once and sent out a wave that passed through you without resistance. You were not tested because you were not the question. You were the answer, the presence they prepared for, not through hope, but through knowing. And as the pulse rippled outward across realms that no longer share borders, watchers stirred, and ancient messengers opened scrolls that had not unsealed in millennia. Each line now pulsing with your signature, and still further ahead, something remained unread. Something no one had ever dared to approach alone, until now. The wind carried no voice. Yet, a message formed at your feet, as if the elements remembered a language that predates the written word. The dunes bowed gently to a presence unseen, but deeply known. and as you stepped forward, the grains of sand shifted into lines, deliberate, ancient, purposeful. And there it was again, a sentence that had not appeared since the Messiah last walked beneath this sun, etched not by hand but by intention. The letters glowed faintly before settling into stillness. He who walks without fear carries the kingdom within. This was not illusion, nor was it memory. It was living inscription formed by the same current that once stilled storms and raised the breathless. The atmosphere thickened as if the desert held its breath, remembering a voice that once echoed across the same expanse, a voice that broke time into before and after now. The words had returned not as prophecy but as confirmation. Each step you took revealed more, not in abundance but in precision. Phrases emerged that matched no scripture, yet carried a vibration unmistakable. Messages that bypassed the mind and settled in the soul. Truths so old they felt new, and in every line the presence of Yeshua remained not as shadow, but as essence, moving beside you unseen, yet undeniable. His energy laced through the patterns that now spiraled outward into the sands, drawing shapes last witnessed by those who walked with him, when the world still trembled at miracles. The dunes themselves began to rise subtly, responding to your frequency, revealing beneath their folds a hidden basin carved into the earth shaped like an open eye water, long buried, began to glisten, and in its reflection the symbols shimmered again, this time forming a circle around your image, and in the center a cross, not of wood but of light, radiant and pulsing with memory. It was never about repeating what once was, it was always about fulfilling what was left undone. And now you stood where the veil had thinned, where the divine whispered once more, through wind and grain, and just beyond the horizon, a figure waited barefoot in white robes, with eyes that held every sorrow and every promise, waiting not to teach but to walk with you toward the truth, written beneath the surface of time itself. There are those who do not live in time, but beside it, watching, recording, weaving their ink into the folds of seconds and centuries. They are the chronoscribes, and they have never interfered, only observed until now, when your signature breached the inner veil, and something long concealed ruptured with a silent command. The seal that bound their highest archive opened not with force, but with inevitability. Its unraveling was not an event. It was a signal. The chamber that held the seal was beyond location, carved in the space between moments where time runs backwards and forward at once. And when the crack formed, the energy inside did not rush out. It pulsed outward, like breath, released after holding too long, and every scribe present trembled, not from fear, but from confirmation. Their hands no longer moved on scrolls. Their quills dropped, suspended in midair, as the ancient scripts restructured themselves in real time, forming a new thread. And at the center of that thread was your mark. This mark had no shape yet. It redefined every symbol it touched, changing meanings, not by erasing them, but by restoring them to their original frequency. Entire prophecies shifted in tone. Records that once warned now sang, and maps that had no landmarks revealed routes formed only in the presence of one who crossed the gate of Leo, unshaken. The scribes looked at one another for the first time with uncertainty, not because they doubted, but because their purpose had begun to rewrite itself. One scroll refused to open until your presence touched the chamber, and then, without being touched, it unfolded. revealing pages once thought mythical, blank to all who had not crossed, and now each line lit with memory, not yours alone, but of all those who came before you, the unseen ones, the erased, the betrayed, the faithful, all whose paths now converged in your crossing. The room dimmed as if time itself was shielding its eyes from what had just been revealed, and from the center, a voice not heard in eons whispered a phrase once forbidden to utter, and the scribes repeated it not in language but in vibration, a song that reconnected threads torn long ago, and still above them, one final scroll remained untouched, floating in stillness, waiting for the moment it would descend into your hands alone. The sky did not change color, but something behind it shifted. The atmosphere thinned, as if the earth itself leaned closer to listen, because your presence no longer belonged to one body. It had become a signal across realms, a summons to what once was, scattered, now beginning to gather across hidden thresholds and silent coordinates, as if the universe had been holding its breath for this exact moment, not because of who you are alone, but because of what your arrival awakens. In distant temples, long sealed by salt wind and silence, the guardians moved without command, their hands placed over symbols that pulsed in rhythm with your breath. Old mechanisms stirred, gears not of metal but of memory began to spin, ancient instruments, recalibrated not to measure time but to announce it, for the return was not of one, it was of many, and you were never meant to walk this alone. In lands buried beneath oceans, names forgotten by men, but whispered by tides, began to stir again. Glowing relics rose from seabeds untouched by light, since the first fall, when the codes were split and scattered, and now the pieces had begun to call to each other, not in panic, but in purpose, frequencies aligning in perfect imperfection, not rehearsed but remembered, as if every lifetime, every silence, every exile was only a rehearsal for this convergence. You were not the cause, you were the catalyst, the convergence of timelines denied, yet inevitable. And those who once fell now begin to rise, not in rebellion, but in recognition, because your awakening reactivates more than prophecy. It reactivates presence, and presence births responsibility, and responsibility is what they feared you would remember. Across the field of time, shadows tried to slow the signal with noise, distortion, mimicry, but none could match the purity of a soul, untouched by manipulation. The seal you carry is not forged by symbols, it is written in choice, and your choices have rippled beyond the script, now rewriting what was declared irreversible. And now, from the space between dimensions, a light bends, and within it forms begin to descend. Not angels, not warriors, but those whose eyes carry the same, knowing the same fire, the same return, and somewhere deep in your being, you recognize them, not by name, but by rhythm, and one steps forward without speaking, holding what the others would never dare to touch. Yet, it was always meant for you.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.